Lieutenant Pauline raised his telescope as the hills moved, not dust, but 20,000 Zulu warriors surging like a tide, horns spreading wide to encircle his camp. Rifles clicked, men fell, and in 2 hours an empire's army vanished. This was Isandlwana, and it began 50 years earlier with the rise of Shaka Zulu. Southern Africa, the 1870s. The land hums with tension. Three powers circle one another like storms on the horizon. The British Empire, hungry and certain of destiny, the Boer republics, restless and armed, and the Zulu kingdom, proud, disciplined, and free. By the decade's end, their collision would redraw the map of the South and echo through history to this day. At the center of this storm stands Zululand, a kingdom born not in submission, but in the forge of transformation. Decades earlier, one man had taken a scattered clan and taught them how to move as one, Shaka Zulu. In a time when neighboring tribes fought ritual skirmishes, Shaka rewrote the meaning of war. He armed his warriors with short stabbing spears, the Ikluwa, and taught them to fight close to feel the heartbeat of battle. He drilled them into regiments, a mabutho, trained from youth, moving with unity, obeying without hesitation. And he gave them a formation, Izimpondo Zankomo, the horns of the buffalo, a strategy of encirclement that mirrored nature itself. Chest to fix the enemy, horns to envelop, loins to strike last. Through this discipline, the Zulu rose. From a small chiefdom, they became a people proud, efficient, and unbroken. By the mid-19th century, the land was now watched by foreign eyes. To the east, the British had anchored themselves at a trading post called Port Natal, today's Durban. What began as commerce soon hardened into conquest. To the west came the Boers, Dutch-speaking farmers seeking freedom from British rule. In the 1830s, their great trek rolled through rivers and velds, their wagons creaking with dreams of new republics. But to settle meant to take, and their path cut through lands long lived in. When the Boers crossed into Zulu territory, blood answered. At Blood River, in 1838, Zulu bravery met Boer firepower. The Zulu fell that day, but not their spirit. They withdrew, learned, and waited. Their kingdom survived, wary of both powers pressing from either side. By the 1870s, Zululand remained sovereign, ruled by King Cetshwayo Kampande, nephew to Shaka, heir to his vision. Cetshwayo was a strategist, a ruler balancing pride with diplomacy. He sought peace with Natal, avoided border provocations, and tried to navigate a world now driven by imperial ambition. Yet he would not disarm his people. The regiments were known as guardians of lineage and land. To ask them to lay down arms was to ask them to cease being Zulu. But across the Tugela River, men like Sir Bartle Frere saw things differently. As the British High Commissioner for Southern Africa, Frere dreamed of a single colonial confederation, a British federation stretching from Cape Town to the Zambezi. To build it, he needed Zululand subdued. To justify conquest, he needed provocation. So he manufactured one. In December 1878, the British presented Cetshwayo with an ultimatum, a list of demands impossible to meet. Disband your army, accept a British resident in your court, surrender sovereignty. It was not a negotiation, it was an order. Cetshwayo's answer was silence, not defiance, but dignity. The king of the Zulu would not bow to a foreign pen. Frere took silence as defiance. The British declared war. In January 1879, 5 columns crossed into Zululand. Their commander, Lord Chelmsford, was a man of titles and reputation, confident that rifles, rockets, and redcoats would make short work of savages. He believed victory would be swift, a campaign of days, perhaps weeks, ending with a humbled king and a grateful colony. He did not understand what he was walking into. The Zulu army he dismissed as primitive was one of the finest indigenous forces in the world, trained, tested, and timed to the heartbeat of the land. They knew the hills and their lands. They had fought before the British had ever seen these plains. And though they carried no rifles, they carried something heavier, the will to defend their world. As Chelmsford's columns snaked deeper into Zululand, they camped beneath the shadow of a mountain called Isandlwana, a jagged outcrop with its peak shaped like the head of a crouched beast. The Zulu watched. Scouts whispered of British movements, their arrogance, their carelessness. Morning broke over the hills of Isandlwana with deceptive calm. The sky burned blue and cloudless, the air sharp and dry, a day made for marching, not for dying. In the British camp below, red coats shimmered in the sunlight, canvas tents fluttered, and the hum of routine filled the air. To the men of the 24th Regiment, this was just another day in the Queen's service, another colonial campaign that would soon be written off in dispatches and celebrated in London clubs. They did not know they were already surrounded. Lord Chelmsford had risen early, uneasy but unhurried. Reports had filtered in the previous day of Zulu movements beyond the hills, sightings of dust clouds and shadows in the valleys. To his mind, these were raiding parties, little more. The Zulu, he believed, would never face the might of the Empire in open battle. They would scatter before the bayonet, hide behind rocks and ravines, too primitive to grasp the principles of modern war. So when scouts reported movement to the east, Chelmsford made a fateful decision. He divided his force, leaving nearly 1,700 men to guard the camp at Isandlwana, a flat expanse beneath the looming mountain. He rode out with more than half his army to chase ghosts across the plains. It was a classic imperial mistake, to chase shadows and leave the heart exposed. In doing so, Chelmsford violated the first rule of war: never underestimate your enemy. Back in camp, command fell to Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pauline, a capable officer but no field general. The camp sprawled wide, ungainly, wagons unmanaged, ammunition scattered, lines stretched thin. It was a camp built for comfort, not defense. To Pauline, the morning seemed uneventful. A few distant riders, a few dust trails on the horizon, nothing to stir alarm. But beyond those hills, the Zulu army lay in silence, 20,000 strong, crouched in the grass, eyes fixed on destiny. For days, they had moved unseen, guided by seasoned commanders, Cetshwayo Koza, the chief strategist, and Mavumengwana Kandlela Ntuli, his co-commander. Under their control, the Amabutho had gathered like a storm behind a ridge known as Inlazache. Orders from King Cetshwayo were clear: engage only if discovered, avoid premature confrontation. The plan was perfection in patience, a trap of silence waiting for folly. But in war, fate has a rhythm of its own. On the morning of January 22, 1879, a reconnaissance force under Major John Dartnell rode out from camp. Before dawn had fully broken, his column brushed against the edge of a Zulu impi, a clash that seemed at first like a skirmish. But it was no accident. It was a trap, laid with precision. The Zulu had dangled a fragment of their strength in the open, bait for imperial arrogance. 5 seconds. Dartnell's encounter sent word racing back to Lord Chelmsford, who believed he'd found the enemy's main host. Acting on that illusion, Chelmsford took half his army and marched out in pursuit, leaving the camp at Isandlwana behind, its tents spread wide, its defenses thin. What remained was a hollowed shell, unaware that the true storm was gathering, not beyond the hills, but above them, waiting to fall with silent fury. The silence shattered into a roar. The first British warning came in the form of dust clouds rising on the northern ridge. Pauline's camp stirred, confusion spreading like wildfire. Couriers galloped in, breathless, shouting reports too unbelievable to credit. Thousands? Tens of thousands? Impossible. Some officers scoffed. The Zulu could not field such a force. But moments later, through telescopes and naked eyes alike, they saw the truth. The hills were moving. Still, disbelief lingered. Pauline ordered companies into extended lines, 2 deep, rifles ready. Bugles rang. The 24th Foot, veterans of countless colonial skirmishes, took position with calm precision. They had fought before, they knew their drill. The Martini Henry rifle could spit lead at over 1,000 yards. A disciplined line could hold against 10 times its number on paper. But this was not paper. This was Zululand moving. The first wave came running, a blur of shields and sinew, assegai flashing like silver fish under sun. The British line fired. A rolling crash of rifles split the air, echoing across the veld. Warriors fell. Others stepped over them without pause. Smoke rose, white and acrid, clinging to the ground. Reload. Fire. Reload. Fire. The front ranks of the Zulu staggered, then pressed closer. For a moment it seemed the British might hold. The disciplined volleys tore gaps in the charging masses. Officers barked orders. Ammunition runners darted between companies. Yet beneath the confidence, cracks formed. The Zulu horns were spreading, sweeping wide, unseen, curling behind the camp. The chest pressed on, forcing the line to stretch thinner, thinner still. The British line fought magnificently, but each volley demanded seconds, and seconds in battle are eternity. And then, the unthinkable. The ammunition began to falter. Mules bolted, wagons jammed, boxes stuck under keys and bureaucracy. In the confusion, resupply broke down. Men reached for cartridges that weren't there. Rifles clicked on empty chambers. Officers shouted for runners who never came. The line wavered. The Zulu saw it. They surged. From the left, the Unokenke and Udududu regiments, the left horn, swung around the flank, cutting off retreat. On the right, the Uve and Ingubamakosi swept down, sealing the circle. The horns met behind the camp, the chest smashed forward, and the loins poured in, thousands fresh and fierce, driving the attack home. What had been a battle line dissolved into chaos. Red coats fired point blank, then fell beneath spears. Men fought in clusters, backs to one another, bayonets flashing. Officers rallied small knots, firing until rifles overheated. Some broke for the wagons, forming desperate squares, their boots slipping in blood and dust. Others fled toward the river, chased by warriors whose war cries rose in haunting unison, the song of a people defending their land. Through it all, the Zulu moved with unity and purpose. They were not a mob, they were a machine, each regiment knowing its role, each warrior bound by oath and rhythm. Where a man fell, another filled his place. Where resistance stiffened, the horns tightened. By mid-afternoon, the camp was gone, swallowed whole. The ground was strewn with bodies in red and brown, the mountain looming over a silence heavy as judgment. Not a tent stood, not a flag waved. The empire's pride lay broken beneath the African sun. Of the 1,700 British and colonial troops who had held the camp, barely a handful escaped. Those who fled spoke of a nightmare, of men swallowed by waves, of discipline undone, of courage outmatched by cunning. And yet, amid the ruin, the Zulu did not gloat. Victory was not conquest, it was justice. They gathered their fallen, sang their praises, honored the dead. The field of Isandlwana was not a trophy, it was a testament. Across the empire, shock rippled. How could spears defeat rifles? How could an African kingdom annihilate a modern army? The British press called it a disaster, a massacre, an aberration. To the Zulu, it was something else entirely. Proof that resolve could humble the empire, that true power was not forged in crowns, but in courage and conviction. But even in triumph, shadows gathered. Across the seas, the empire reeled, and then resolved. Britain could not allow this defeat to stand. Retribution was already on its way. For now, the horns had closed, the song had been sung, and the land was quiet once more. But in the distance, smoke rose from the engines of vengeance. The Zulu had humbled an empire. Now that empire would come with fire at Ulundi 6 months later. If you enjoyed watching this video, catch up on more African wars/battles on the channel.